starting in verse 1, Genesis 21 says this. The Lord visited Sarah just as he had said he would, and did for Sarah what he had promised. So Sarah became pregnant and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the appointed time that God had told him. Abraham named his son, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. Laughter. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him, just as God had commanded him to do. Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And we should all just stop right there and say, whoa. Okay, whoa. Sarah said in verse 6, God has made me laugh. Everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. She went on to say, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have given birth to a son for him in this old age. Do you hear the joy in Sarah's words? This story is the culmination of a 25-year-old promise in which God promised Abraham that he would have many descendants. The past 2 decades have been a series of ups and downs, like when Abraham and Sarah forced Hagar, an Egyptian woman, to bear Abraham a child. After all of this waiting, sometimes waiting poorly and sometimes waiting godly, God shows up. God blesses Sarah and Abraham with a boy, Isaac. True to his name, Isaac, meaning laughter, Isaac's birth brings immense joy to Sarah. Her delight reminds us of Eve's delight in Genesis 4 when she gave birth to Cain. I wonder if this story in Genesis 21 intentionally rhymes with the beginning of the entire book. You see, in Genesis 1 and 2, God blessed Adam with Eve. And similarly, God blesses Abraham and Sarah with Isaac. But as we know, Genesis 3 also shows how quickly the blessed relationships turned into fractured relationships. If you remember how at first, in the way that God set up his creation, there was a good relationship between God and humanity with the land. But upon Adam and Eve's disobedience, hostility arises between the first couple. The land becomes burdensome for them. And of course, they have to be cast out. This even goes on to the next generation with conflict between Cain and Abel. And similarly, in this passage, the birth of Isaac begins with laughter, but disrupts into lament. The parallels between the first family and Abraham's family are startling. Just as Eve celebrated Cain, Sarah celebrates Isaac. Just as Cain rose against Abel, conflict surrounding Ishmael and Isaac results in Hagar and Ishmael's exile. When you get to the middle of the story, when you find Hagar, the Egyptian, and Ishmael, her son, they'll be in the desert. The two are starving and dehydrated. Ishmael is so weak that Hagar has to put his limp body onto the ground and walk away, not wanting to see him die. The chords of Genesis 4 are strung again. Abel dies, and here Ishmael is dying. Just like in the beginning, God's work was filled with dignity and worth, but his creation turned it into hostility. Now, the grace God granted to Abraham and Sarah is a blessing to them, but ends up being a curse to Hagar and Ishmael. Yet God, once again, steps in. Just like when God heard the cry of Abel's blood from the ground, God hears the cry of Ishmael. The blessing to Abraham was not only one that would just bless his family to make them large, but that through his family, God would bless the nations. But in this moment of this blessing that is to come, Abraham and Sarah turn it into a curse for the Egyptian mother and son. I really want us to stop here and just make sure we understand this. God's grace is something so grand that it should bless the people around us. This is what Jesus did for the world. Jesus, the descendant of Abraham, fulfilled the promises of God and blessed the nation, so much so that non-Jewish people can be called children of Abraham. For those who are living in God's new beginning, like you and me, We are not to see the grace of God as good news for us and bad news for the others. No, that's just a fractured relationship. When people think of the church, I hope they think of joy rather than selfishness. Those who are in God's new creation play a role in this. As we consistently receive God's immeasurable grace, we are to share this joyful noise to the rest of the world. Sarah and Abraham quickly turned the joy of Isaac into hardship for Ishmael and Hagar. What would it look like for Jesus' followers to approach God's blessings with other people in mind, instead of thinking about this selfishly? Maybe we would not only act different, maybe we would even pray different.